Well, Kristine Poptanich, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to talk with you a little bit about this great endeavor that you've started. So, first, before we begin, tell us a little bit about why you are so fascinated with space.
I think it's impossible not to be fascinated by space. When you look at, I tell everybody about my background image, which is the Hubble Ultra Deep Field. And what it means to me is there's two possibilities out there. One is that we are alone, in which case we really need to get our acting gear. Or two is that there's other things out there. And to me, that also means we have to get our acting gear. There's just so much potential out there, and we're leaving a lot of that potential on the table. And so as a society, we want to figure out how we can get everybody moving in the direction of taking advantage of all these opportunities out there. So space to me is just, it's something that inspires, it's something that reminds us that there's so much more out there to reach for.
So, I know that you have two homeschool children. Was it with your daughters in mind that you kind of started this new venture? Maybe we can talk a little bit about it's 23, right? Launch 23.
Launchpad 23, yes. Everyone says, "Why Launchpad 23?" And I always harken back to, Harry Potter has platform 9 and 3/4, we've got Launchpad 23. You need to remember in life that there's an opportunity to jump off and do more. And so for us, Launchpad 23 is just a way of reminding people that there's a place that you can come and do more, and for especially for students. And absolutely, I had my daughters in mind. You don't start any sort of venture without realizing it's going to be a lot of work, and work necessarily means a trade-off. As a parent, every parent understands this. We all want to do more for our kids, but at the same time, we want to be present for our kids. But at the end of the day, for me, it came down to I can raise the two most amazing children in the world, but they're just going to be drops in the ocean unless there's a wonderful, beautiful ecosystem out there in the ocean for them to swim in. So they need to have other people out there, other kids, other dreamers, other creators to work with, to play with, to evolve and shape and network with. Because again, every system in the world is so complex. So having an ability to network these kids at this age, matching up kids with similar interests at this age, imagine what the possibilities are. So I absolutely did this for them. I did this for them because I don't want them to just be restricted to their geographical friendships. I don't want them to be restricted to even friendships within the United States, which is where we are. There are global relationships to be had out there. I always say that, if kids have a 1 in a million interest, that means there's 8,000 people out there who share it. So why not network these kids together, allow them to find other kids who have similar interests and complementary interests, and get them dreaming together right now. So that's what we're all about.
Right. Well, if you think about, some years ago, if you think about homeschool, you think about a small group, very insular, very isolated, not really able to provide, even some of the resources maybe that the public school kids have. And now you're talking about something more elite and distinguished and distinctive. So, what in your background from social media and your entrepreneurial skills, what kind of preparation in life did you have that set you up to say, all right, now I'm going to do this Launchpad 23?
Oh, wow. That's one of the things that amazed me. I was listening to some of your previous podcasts, and one of the things that always amazed me is that there's never one route. Whatever you thought you were going to be, you never go on one straight trajectory. And when I was developing my competencies, I tried to make sure I had a bunch of different ones so that I could serve in different ways, which led me to have a bunch of unique skills. I was able to during COVID, to jump into an entrepreneurial position and become a vice president at an ed tech company. Why? Because I had worked with kids, I had worked with the gifted community, I had worked in that space. So I think that really what it is learning how to do program management. I think at the core of everything is you need to be able to take an idea from start to finish. And if you have those skills, you can apply those in pretty much anywhere your heart desires. But learning how to go from idea to completion it takes hard work. It takes heart, it takes effort, it takes a willingness to not worry about people who tell you you're doing it the wrong way. One of the things I always like to talk about is the fact that, if you're at the leading edge, no one's going to think you're doing it right. Everyone's going to tell you that you're doing it wrong because nobody's seen it done that way. So, in my background, being able to work to see the interconnectedness of all the fields, I think, is really what underlies it the most. which is it takes people who know how to work policy and programs in order to make programs work. It takes people who know how to do art and to do communication, to sell ideas, to get the money and the financing that makes big ideas possible. It takes people who have, teamwork and that natural leadership skill to pull people into a great endeavor. It takes all the skills. It takes all the skills, and no one person has those. So instead of
Right.
trying to be that one person, my philosophy has always been develop my skills and then build with others. And so I think that that's allowed me to get to a place that did not seem like a straight connection from my academic expertise to where I am today.
Well, I have two questions, but the one that I want to get to ultimately is how this kind of what the problem is with our current educational system that kind of prevents this from happening. But before we get to that, tell our audience a little bit more about specifically what Launchpad 23 is. I know it's a way for kids to kind of but a little bit more about what they could do in it's an after school program, right? Online, similar to the Aerospace and Innovation Academy. But you're seeking to provide, I think, if I remember correctly, connections to people who might be able to mentor them in certain areas. So let's start with that and then lead to why we're lacking this in our educational system.
Oh, both of those are meaty topics. I love them both. So the first part is I always visualize it as a tree. A tree has a taproot. That taproot is essential to its life. You kill that, tree ain't going anywhere. For kids, that's their interest. Every child has one or more interests that are their taproot. And if you nourish that, that doesn't mean that it only grows. Actually, what grows is all the rest of the roots out from it. So if you want to connect kids to every single subject, if you want them to be passionate, whatever, every parent has their pet subjects that they hope their kid flourishes in. The fastest way to that is not to try to force your kid into a math program or force your kid into a science program. The key is investing in that interest. And from there, they will find the connections to the things you care about as well. So at Launchpad 23, what we really do is invest in that passion, invest in that anchoring interest, and try to use that as a launch pad to all the other subjects, to all the other things that they need to know in order to be successful. Because again, it doesn't matter if a lot of parents cap out as I want to get my child into college. Well, guess what? Their whole life starts after that. So really what we want to do is make sure that these kids have the skills they need to be ready. How we do that is two different things. And to me, these are the two key components that have not come together. They haven't come together in the private sector offerings of supplementing. They haven't come together definitely in the formal education sphere. One is obviously how you teach kids. And project-based learning is, I think, overly simplified. You need to challenge them. Kids are capable of so much more. I think your kids and Blue Sky show this. They are capable of so much more than anybody thinks they are. So challenging them, showing them that it's not necessarily going to always be fun, but it will always be rewarding. And in fact, the harder you work, the more rewarding it will be. Get them off this dopamine fix of I can, play games. That's great, but that's not real life. Not everything in life can be made into a game. They need to learn how to do hard work. So our classes focus on how to do hard work, how to face really big challenges. We bring them meaty topics. I always joke, it's not mine originally, but somebody once told me that if a child at 2 can say Tyrannosaurus Rex, maybe we're talking down from them to them when we talk baby talk. That's true through our entire education. Kids are capable of more. We introduce them to real topics. We talk to them about not just settling Mars, but what would they do? We throw scenarios at them. We talk about mental models. We throw it all in there because they're capable of it. So the classes are just fundamentally different. The
Right.
second piece is critical is community. Kids need connection. Everyone needs connection, right? I always joke that Maslow's hierarchy of needs actually is completely out of whack because really connection is the one thing that people will give up healthy things in order for that connection. But what if instead of we had them giving up healthy things for connection, we made connection healthy? And that's what the community we're building is trying to accomplish. Bringing kids together in a community that tells them that they're good, their dreams are good, that encourages them, that builds a positive relationship instead of, again, a lot of the critical culture that we have. Our culture is very critical. We shut people down, we shut kids down. And so we want to build the classes, the community, stick them together. That's an experience that is, we think, the fuel towards a successful enterprise. In terms of why that doesn't happen in the school systems today, if I had to nail it down, I would say the problem with modern education is a lacking return on investment. And I'm really passionate about this right now because kids are forced, compulsory in most cases, to give the first 13 years of their formative years to education. They're told they don't have a choice. 13 years is a long time. You'd expect, if I told anyone who's listening to this, if I said you had to give us 13 years of your life, they'd say, wow, I expect a really high return on investment for that.
Yeah.
But after it, they're told that's not enough. And
Yeah.
then we say, oh, now you have to give 4 more. But if you give 4 more, then you're going to be ready. And by the way,
That's
those
no
4 more,
guarantee for sure.
right? Those
Right.
4 more are going to cost you too,
Well, and it's
especially here
something
in the
different.
United
Like that
States.
was our generational like mindset, but this is a completely different
Yeah,
generation.
we're in a really different economy. Let me unpack about 5 things you said in the last 10 minutes, okay?
Yeah.
Because I made a few notes. First of all, you emphasized that you want your students to embrace harder work and that it may not be fun. I agree with you. And the way I had always couched it with my kids was in terms of like sports teams. You don't deserve to win unless you put in the time and prepared. And I would also add, I've never coached a winning team that was not having a good time. So once you do get, that work in place, then you should expect to enjoy yourself because you have earned that position. Secondly, I thought it was very interesting what you said about being on the leading edge, how everyone is a naysayer if it's never been done. I look at the other side of the coin, which is when you are first to do something, you don't get judged the same way, right? So when you do break through and have that success, you get to be first. And so that puts you in a whole different category. So I very much recognize and appreciate about there's the hype cycle, right? The hype cycle about early adopters. I think the secret sauce for you and for us is how do we find those families that are focused on being early adopters of maybe an education model that did not exist prior, but has some really good returns. And those are those loyal families that, some have been with us for years, and I'm sure you'll see the same thing. The last thing I wanted to bring up was she asked about why we're ineffective. And I'll share this. I spent some time at NSF, and what I heard, I call it white noise. There's so much stuff out there. I can appreciate why people don't know what is the right path. Everyone, it's sort of like barbecue. Everyone thinks they're good at it, but they're really not. So I feel like my question to you is, how do we cut through the white noise, and how do we really position ourselves to inform parents to help them understand, like you said, why wait 13 years to begin to do what you love? You should do it when you're 5 years old. So that way education becomes the means by which you get to do what you love, right?
Well, and you can identify yourself in those career fields you wouldn't even know are open to you.
So that's my question, and some great points you made. But how do we cut through the white noise and help our prospective clients, our families, understand that this has a good return on investment?
Yeah, I also want to just jump back quickly because you talked about earning the win. I think that that's something that a lot of parents see happening with their gifted children. It's such a pleasure to have a gifted child. It's also a challenge. It's a challenge to keep in front of them. And one of the challenges I see a lot with gifted kids is they do what comes easily because it comes easily,
Right.
and then they stop. And
Yeah.
it's really hard to get them to go that next step because they're so used to things coming easily to
Sure,
them.
and sometimes they have bad study
And then
habits.
they assume
they don't know grit. It's actually
Yep.
harder to help develop grit in someone who has never had to exert themselves academically.
we see it all the time. Like they assume that, oh, I'm just not good at this, so I give up. That happened to my own daughter. Yeah.
Exactly. They misinterpret effort as meaning, well, that's just not my natural strength. And it's like, no, 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 no. At some point, no matter where you are, you're going to get to that point where you actually have to work hard for it. And that's been a huge issue in the gifted community. It's a huge issue with all the gifted kids I see, is getting them over that hump of, oh, now I have to actually work hard for it. And that is actually a good sign. That's a good indicator. But I think that also goes back to the white noise issue and positioning, is that there are a lot of families have a collective action problem. We all want better education, but nobody is unifying people around what that means. And so there are a lot of parents out there who are looking for this. Unfortunately, there are a lot of parents out there looking for this who are, as you said, it's not just white noise, it's also time. I don't know about you guys. I don't exactly have a free calendar. And so you try your best as a parent, but you go into Google and you type better education, like, and you're flooded. You're just flooded with promises. And so I think one of the ways that parents can get through the noise is look at what the organization is saying. Are they making promises that are, I will get your kids into Stanford? Well, again, that's a very different goal. So I think looking for what the program's actually accomplishing and specifics. I think that's where you guys shine so beacon on the hill for so many parents is that you guys offer specifics. These are the specific things that our children have done that show that they are actually taking those steps versus here's a bunch of fluffy language and promises, it's specifics. And so I think that if parents learn to be more discerning, um, they'll get to the answers faster. But I am sympathetic. I know that it is hard as a
Right.
parent to make the time to do the research. But I think that those false promises, as nice as they sound, are what leads people astray. And so,
Sure.
you know,
Well,
buyer
looking at our
beware.
backgrounds alone, I think we can agree that space and aerospace and the exploration of space is that a theme
Mhm.
that we should be able to get some, critical mass. And we are living in a very unique era where space has become democratized, right? Even for us lowly middle school kids, right?
Yes.
So I do think I do see hope in that we should leverage and ride this great wave of space enthusiasm.
Well, I want to piggyback off of that too, if I can, by just saying, like, I think one of the other issues that we see in the educational system, especially when it comes from parenting, right? From that perspective, because oftentimes we just assume, okay, they're at school, that's the job of the teachers, the admin there. But even when we do have schools that are challenging, sometimes we forget as parents that our kids should be experiencing failure along the way, and that when we see that happening, we instantly want to point fingers and think that that's not part of the process. So, and a lot of parents that we come across, and we have some fantastic parents, but there are others who want to do a lot of the work for them. Like, in other words, let me clear the path, let me plow over top of all these issues, instead of realizing that that's part of the struggle. I don't know how we change that, because I've been teaching a long time, and I've seen each generational cohort, the parents kind of are a different group each time, right? I don't know how we get them to embrace the idea that the failure is good, that the opportunities, because I think that's what you provide and what we provide as well, as opportunities for kids who do want to work hard, who do want to experience failure, who do want to then build from that and build like something that's really tangible.
That's
But how
real.
we get there? You know what I mean? Like, how do we convince them that you want your kid to work to not feel comfortable?
Well, and what's funny is, ironically, it's actually the easier way to parent. It's actually easier parenting. So for all of us parents who feel overwhelmed, the answer is actually stepping back and allowing your child to do more for themselves. And to think about, and as morbid as it sounds, to think about, if you're not there, you want your child to be capable. And so just stepping back, I absolutely agree with you. I think that the answer for parents is that they feel a tremendous amount of pressure, that the environment for education has become so competitive that if your child doesn't get into the top school, the top whatever, that somehow you have failed and your child's not going to lead a happy, successful life. And you guys know from every person that you guys have interviewed that that is so not true.
Yep.
The answer to life and the answer to happiness does not come from a degree. It does not come from a piece of paper. It certainly does not come from an individual institution. It comes from following your passion. It comes from being successful within that passion. And going back to the point that you made, Kevin, about space. Space is, again, we always think so negatively, like social media bad. Social media could be good. Gateway drugs bad. Space is like the ultimate intellectual gateway drug. It is fascinating. It connects to every single academic subject. There is not a child out there that I have found that cannot be excited about space. If they're not excited about space, they were not taught about space in a way that engaged them at all. It doesn't take a lot. So I think we need to take these topics like space that capture the imagination and really run with them, and run with them not just in the science classes, run with them in every class. Because again, it takes every single subject to make space possible for humanity. So stop keeping space siloed within, yes, we'll learn about it in science class, but guess what? Use space in art, use space in, social studies, the humanities, all of it can benefit. So I think, but parents are a key part of the solution. Nobody's more important in a child's life than their parent,
Yeah,
positive or negative. So
I so much agree with the idea of the cross collaboration. In fact, when we were trying to figure out what it would look like if we were actually to open a school, right? It really was centered around the idea that if we treated education more about an industry, right? And yes, the aerospace industry is where we tend to be, but it could be any industry for that matter. Every class then can revolve around that. You find whatever so I might be good in English, you might be good in math, but within that, we're working on a larger project that's related to something in industry. And I think that if we could change that, if we could get our government to kind of adopt that idea from this is what we're going to unfold as the new paradigm for the public school system, and connect our communities with our schools and the people that are in the field to come in and mentor. We have to get there, and yet it's taking private individuals like ourselves and what you're doing just to kind of to change that. It's unfortunate, but at least
Yes.
it's a start.
you
And
know what? You say it's unfortunate, but I actually think it's what's necessary. Systems have a hard time changing themselves.
Yeah.
They very, very rarely do legacy systems just miraculously turn things around. But I think that going back to what you were saying about the fact that, you know, if we go ahead and say that people on the outside care, this is not something that teachers who have gone through their entire education and have never stepped outside a classroom, that's not where the answer is going to come. The answer is that infusion of passion, that infusion of knowledge from industry, from the outside. You don't have to, I think one of the things that we're really trying to trumpet is the fact that you don't need a teaching degree to make a student's eyes come alive, to make a student that next generation. So getting industry to take more of a vested interest in that next generation. I think the aerospace industry has done a lot. The further we push that down, the more we light up their eyes at 5, the more they're accomplishing at 15, and by 25, forget about it. They've got their own company and are doing amazing things.
right, yeah, you're reading the mail a little bit there. I had two very different careers before I ever ended up in education, and I think being atypical actually was the reason for the success I had, not a hinder, but it was the biggest
Absolutely.
also fusing entrepreneurial ideas with real world authentic industry type education. I'll share this with you. I was in a workshop with NASA physics folks last week, and they reported on data from a world study. They looked at poor nations, rich nations, and they looked at 15-year-olds, and universally, whether it was poor nations, wealthy nations, regardless of religion and background, the theme, one of 3 themes that was most resonating universally on the earth is the interest in the possibility of life in space. So
Makes me happy.
that's where you need to, that's where we should go. Exobiology, astrobiology, let's put people in things in space and let's go.
But then I wonder too, like when we talk about like what we do or whatever, how do we provide these opportunities for those underserved populations then, when you're talking about those who aren't as wealthy, right, who might not be able to afford an after school class, but not even that, even if it were free, if they haven't had the background enough to get them to where they can even understand a first class, that's another huge issue that we seem to
Sean, I can't agree with you more. I've got so many people who talk to me about the importance of apprenticeships, of mentorships. That's all well and good, but you got to get them ready for it.
Yes.
You can't take kids out of a system that's not working and then say magically, now go be great. That's putting too much pressure and stress on the mentor to somehow get them up to speed. So that's why we see programs like yours, programs like what we're doing, as stepping stones. We're
Right.
going to create the skills that then when they get into those mentorships and all the different opportunities out there, that's when the magic happens. And that's the difference between an internship of serving coffee and an internship of actually doing something.
Right.
So
Because
then we have to do something from a policy aspect
Right.
then to change it to where these programs become available.
And let
Shauna,
me
you know that goes straight to my heart. Policy,
Yeah.
yes.
let's jump on this point for just a minute, because for many years, because I came from industry first, I can see the company's perspective, right? They have shareholders, right? They have stock owners, and their fiduciary responsibility is to provide a return. So when you talk to them about the workforce and the pipeline, they can only look down about as far as undergrad, maybe high school if it's some vocational skills. But it's almost, and I'm a very conservative person, but it is the role of the government to create the environment. If the companies won't do it, who is left that has means? It is in the government's best interest to create a pipeline of future scientists and engineers that are going to be able to lead these nations, these companies to do great things. But the companies, my experience, as we try to go and get support from companies, when we're talking about the pipeline, it's too late once you failed algebra 1 to say I'm going to be a physicist or an engineer, right? You have to do well in algebra, then you have to do well in calculus. There's a pipeline. So how do you think we can better engage industry when they're much less blue sky and over the horizon and much more focused on my quarterly profit statements and things like that? How do we get industry to see we are looking out for your best interest?
Well, I think there's so many things in this. I love your guys' questions. You guys just, right into the meaty stuff. So I think part of it is you talk about this pipeline, and we want to make sure that there is that pipeline, but I don't necessarily know that industry necessarily has to be investing a lot of money. It doesn't take a lot of money to have a person come once a quarter to talk to a student about something. It doesn't take a lot of money. In fact, it doesn't actually take industry investing to make these things happen. This is about individuals investing time. And at some point, we have the technology, we have the passionate individuals. So I think to some degree, we can make it come together. Now, how do you supercharge that? That's where I think policy comes in, because you're absolutely right. Government could supercharge that overnight. Overnight. We can make it so that companies do get rewarded for it. Companies can also change their cultures to view it not as a outflow of, yes, we're just doing some public relations community stuff, but rather as, hey, we're actually rewarding our people, because guess what? People who talk to kids come away happy.
Well, I'm thinking about those that aren't 16 who could do adult level work, who need to be engaged in that level.
Mhm.
I can't get kids into medical laboratories, for instance. I can't, as a general rule, companies don't want under 16s in their
Yep.
labs. It's one thing if I take a scientist out to the students. What I think is even more effective is getting the students in the lab doing the real work as soon as possible. How do we make that in the best interest of the companies? That's a hard thing, right? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, without stepping outside my subject matter expertise, the people who we really care about right now, we're talking about the insurance companies, right? Because that's why the companies are concerned, is realistically their insurance concerned about liability. And we have seen time and time again that the government can and does influence liability protection. They can tell companies when they can and cannot step in and out of a market. So there's absolutely precedence here for the government taking a step in the direction of helping insurers, helping the insurers talk to their insurance companies, and helping insurance companies make choices that allow us to move faster as a society. Again, there's no time in history until modern times that we waited and held off on people doing anything until they were 24, 25. That's not historically where kids are able to start to contribute. So absolutely, does government have a place to influence this? Absolutely. I think it's less with the industry, but more with what's holding industry up, because again, everyone's got an insurance company. And so I think the government has shown an ability to influence that time and time again.
It's interesting, the nexus between industry, education, the government, and parenting. It's a very intricate web, but I know I agree with a lot of what you're saying. So yeah.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
thinking from internationally, because you had mentioned before the idea of building these networks that go beyond not only our community or our country, but to the world. And I'm thinking sometimes that other nations seem to have a better idea about how to solve these problems from a governmental aspect. I'm wondering, as these nations are even emerging nations, right? As they're emerging, they seem to be more willing to cut through that red tape of all these protections. We got to make sure, these regulations, and more willing to take risks. And at some point, I wonder when we're going to get around to really looking at the idea of the younger student. We invest much earlier because it's not risky at all. It's a risk not to.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I don't necessarily think the answer is government realizing this for themselves.
Right.
It's going back to the web that you were talking about, Kevin. It's all these pieces are part of a puzzle. And what we really need is for parents to stop acting like individual actors, promoting for their individual kids, and to start to exercise their voices. Shauna, we talked about, policy is the fact that every parent out there feels disappointed by some aspect of their child's schooling. Every parent out there feels disappointed about or uncertain, unease, just like they're just concerned about their child's future. So if we stop saying, hey, I'm just going to narrowly push for my child's interest, we do have the ability collectively to ask for things, and expecting that internships, externships, all the different opportunities out there, apprenticeships, expecting this as part of education is absolutely a potential. And once you start to expect it, then I think um, all the locked doors will start to open up. But it does require parents as a mass to make time in their busy calendars to ask for more from their local school districts, ask for more from their policymakers, ask for more. It's the only thing that's ever changed anything, right?
I think my final question is, and just being cognizant of our time, was really going to be, so for those parents listening, like, what can they do? And I think you kind of hit upon it there, but feel free at this point to kind of really share about where they can find you, find your, the Launchpad and all that on social media. But what can parents who are listening, or even teachers who want to open up these opportunities for their students, do to open up these opportunities in general, for not just their child, but for all the ones that they know?
Absolutely. I think first thing that comes to mind for every parent and every educator is to just make yourself aware of what's already out there. We're launchpad23.org. Since you said we could plug, like, there you go. That's us. Find us out there. But there are so many opportunities out there that are well-intentioned that don't cost a lot. So if you're looking at a large price tag for your child's future, it's probably not the best solution. Go out there and find the people who are doing this because they care about the next generation, investing in them. So find those free resources, find those low-cost resources that put the right skills and the right tools in the hands of kids. And I think the second part is understanding effective advocacy. You're not going to get anywhere by casually mentioning something in a parent-teacher conference. You got to be the squeaky wheel. I think every student deserves a parent that is a squeaky wheel. As much as it's sad that that's what it takes in society, that is what it takes. So I think parents giving themselves permission to be the squeaky wheel, to say that my child's not being served, whether that's, no matter where that is, no matter what their subject matter interest, if your child's not being served, then it is absolutely incumbent upon you. Job number one, we all have a second job, the job we do to make money, to pay for the house and everything else. But job number one is that parent, being a parent and advocating successfully, and advocating until you get the answer that you need. And I think that's the second part of it, is that parents not giving up. Don't let the district convince you that you cannot do what you need to do for your child. Here where I live, we have a huge issue with gifted children getting the resources that they need. Keep advocating, keep reaching out, talk to other parents. Don't give up, because your child is learning. As we all know as parents, our kids learn by what we do, not what we say. If they see you tirelessly advocating for their interests, I don't think there's any better gift a parent can give in this environment. It's not a perfect environment, but if they see you showing grit and determination and not giving up on their dreams, that's going to translate into the ultimate success for them.
I wonder too if those parents, when they're advocating, also realize that it's a good time for their students to be able to speak up about what they need and to advocate for themselves as well. There's nothing more powerful, like when we take our students in to talk to our legislators, but even a student who goes and has the confidence to be able to talk to a teacher, to be able to talk to an administrator, to go to the school district, make a presentation and say, here's what we feel lacking. And I think that's a really strong skill that we can help them with as well. I know we're going to have you back for more. I really appreciate you giving your time today, but we look forward to shout out that email address, or rather the website again,
Launchpad23.org. Visit
right,
us.
I'm going to put it in the show
And
notes as well.
we actually, all of our most successful classes, we put the entire packet up on the web for free. And so if you go to our website, launchpad23.org, if you're looking for fun summer things, fun break things, you want your child's just not getting it in school, they're bored, like, go on there. We promise they will not be bored. They will challenge them. So
We appreciate that. We look forward to talking with you again soon. Thanks so much.
absolutely. Thanks so much, guys.